I wanted to play this clip. Now, I've been making the bull case for Kamala on my show, mostly because I think most of the evidence is lining up on that side, that there's a bull case for Kamala. As of right now, I think she's likely to win the election. But at the same time, you know, CNN does these segments seemingly every day about where the numbers are at and what's going to happen, and, you know, you'll see little things here and there that are like, well, this is a little bit of an outlier. What does this mean? Does this mean Trump's going to win? Does this mean Kamala's going to win? And the one came out the other day from Harry Enton where he's talking about basically the bull case for Trump. So let's watch and we'll react.
A percentage of the public that thinks that the country is on the right track when the incumbent party loses. It's 25%. That 25% looks an awful bit like that 28% up there. It doesn't look anything like this 42% doesn't look anything like this 28%. So the bottom line is, very few Americans think the country is on the right track at this particular point. It tracks much more with when the incumbent party loses than with it wins. In fact, I went back through history. There isn't a single time in which 28% of the American public thinks the country is going on the right track in which the incumbent party actually won. They always lose when just 28% of the country believes that the country is on the right track. Now, we don't know if Kamala Harris is going to succeed Joe Biden, but we know back in 2008, George W. Bush, his approval rating was down in the 20s.
So we covered a clip a few weeks back or maybe a month ago where there's been a massive uptick among, I think, women of color for registration. Do you remember that clip? I think it was like a CBS clip.
Yeah, and Tom Bonnier, Target Smart, who did that analysis.
He seems to be making the opposite case, that there's a surge in Republican signups. So that gets me a little bit confused because my understanding to this point is that it's actually quite the opposite, that you have women who are signing up at unprecedented rates and voting early at unprecedented rates.
I think it depends on the time frame over which you're looking. So overall, Republicans have registered more voters. If you look specifically right after Dobbs and then again right after Biden drops out when Kamala is the nominee, you see a huge surge in women registering and specifically Black women registering to vote in quite large numbers, which also could indicate, you know, the thing with new voter registrations too is that the pollsters usually don't let them through their likely voter model because they've never voted before. But actually, first-time registrants are more likely to vote than people who have been registered for a long time, so that if you have a large number of people who have just registered to vote, that can lead to some misses in the polling. But, I mean, listen, he's right. If Trump wins, we'll look back and we'll say it was pretty simple. You know, people don't like where the country is. The Democrats are in charge, and Joe Biden hangs sort of as an albatross around Kamala Harris's neck throughout this whole thing. And he's a very unpopular president, and there you go. I think that is sort of some of the structural factors that really do disadvantage her in terms of this race. Now, will that be determinative when, on the other hand, you've got this dude who is, you know, criminally convicted and running around insulting every minority group and talking about the enemy within and how he wants to send out the military, and who has been defeated, you know, lost the popular vote in 2016, but actually defeated in the Electoral College by a significant margin in 2020, who time and time again, majority of Americans have shown, like, we do not like this guy and want him in power. So a unique set of circumstances, which could lead to a historical anomaly where the party in power, even though the right track, wrong track numbers are so dire, where the party in power still is able to hold on to the White House. And if you want evidence of that, perhaps you look to 2022. When part of what led to the red wave narrative was a polling miss, but another part of what led to the red wave narrative was the idea that historically, party in the White House, first midterm elections, they almost always do really, really bad. But since you had all of these anomalous factors of Stop the Steal and Roe versus Wade and Donald Trump hanging over all of it and the sense of extremism and the Republicans nominating some characters that really fed into that, you end up bucking the historical trends. So I guess that's what I'll say about it.
So a couple thoughts. Listening to that, my mind keeps going back to best case scenario for Republicans. He's talking about all these new signups and registrations for Republicans. But if you include the fact that just before that there was a massive surge in Democratic registration, then wouldn't it really be a wash, right? So that's the first thing my mind keeps coming back to is like, okay, there may be more Republicans signing up right now, but it wasn't that long ago. It was the exact opposite.
I think overall, if you talk about between the last election, like 2020, and now, there have been more Republican registrations than there have been Democrat. And then the other thing is
that a fact, though? Or is that... Okay.
Yes. And then the other thing is that there also has been an increase in Republican self-identification, where historically, typically, Democrats lead in terms of who, like, how many people in the country are just like, yes, I'm a Democrat, or yes, I'm a Republican. And Republicans have improved those numbers by some measures. They've overtaken Democrats in terms of Republican partisan self-identification. So that's the other thing to point to. One thing that I think is worth taking note of is a lot of younger voters, and especially some states have like automatic voter registration, and so you just sort of like automatically get put in and not with a party selected. But a lot of younger voters who tend to be more Democratic tend to register as unaffiliated or independent or whatever, even though they're much more likely to vote for Democrats. So that's kind of the like grain of salt that I put into that analysis about how significant that is.
So a couple other points. The big overarching number here is right track, wrong track. The right track number is very low. People think we're going in the wrong direction. The question is, will Kamala Harris be blamed for that wrong track?
Yes.
Because in my mind, it's like Trump's insanity is one of the main reasons why we're on the wrong track, number one. Number two,
that's true, yeah.
He was president and she was never president. So the neat categories of like incumbent versus non-incumbent, it doesn't really apply. He has had control of the country. She has never had direct control of the country.
Yeah.
So that really doesn't work. And then the final point I want to bring up is, as much as you look at that right track, wrong track and go, oh, that doesn't look good for Democrats, how does this look for Democrats? Here's Trump and Vance and where they're at favorability-wise. Vance is -1. Trump is -8. Tim Walz is +9. Kamala Harris is +6. So both Democrats are above water and both Republicans are underwater.
Yeah.
And so it reminds me of that old, what was it, a Thomas Jefferson line of there's lies, damned lies, and statistics. And it's like, yeah, we're kind of fucking reading the tea leaves here because that number that we just saw from Enton looks horrible for Democrats, but the numbers I just gave for you here look horrible for Republicans.
Well, in fact, I just saw on Twitter, Enton today did the bull case for
Kamala.
If Kamala wins, the signs were there all along, and one of them was the favorability rating.
And I covered the other day, and something he said the other day, and he was making the argument that, if anything, Kamala Harris is underestimated in the polls. That was the argument that he was making. And I mean, from what I've seen, okay, so many pollsters have it dead tied. 49-49.
Yeah.
And even Nate Silver now has come out and said, this is not right. Yeah. It's like a statistical impossibility that you got 4 massive major pollsters and they all come back, oh, it's exactly the same. That doesn't happen, right?
Right.
So then you go, all right, well, then who's not saying that? And the ones who are not saying that are typically, you know, the right-wing pollsters that always are bullish on Republicans, and they don't even have him up as much as he was. But the other one is Ipsos, which has Kamala at +4 nationally, and it was 48,000 likely voters were part of that poll. And they have the detailed breakdown of like gender, demographics, age group, income level, etc. And so for me, you know, I look at all that and I'm like, that is more persuasive to me than everything is exactly tied and every swing state is within the margin of error. That doesn't strike me as the case right now.
Yeah, so you're referring to the Cooperative election study that interviews 78,000 people across the country.
48, I thought.
Well, I think the larger, it's 78,000, and then through the likely voter screen, I think it's 48,000 and something like that.
I got you.
But yeah, they broke it down also by, you know, they'd have their own likely voter screen, which means that some sort of like human judgment goes into, okay, who do we really think is going to vote, et cetera, et cetera. But you're right, they come out with a +4 national environment, which, by the way, that's what Joe Biden won by. So it's not, it sort of makes sense that that's just like where the country is. There's, 40-some% that is in favor of Trump. And then you have a majority on the other side that are part of this broad anti-Trump coalition. That's effectively what they're finding. And in their state-by-state breakdown, they have Trump winning Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. And they have Kamala winning the blue wall states plus Nevada, which is enough. So, for what it's worth, that is the largest survey that we will get of voters, and that's what they are ultimately finding. So, I have become increasingly sort of confident that I think Kamala will pull it off. One of the other things that's persuasive to me is that the gender gap in early voting
colossal
is quite large. especially in swing states, and more women are voting than men. More women always vote than men, actually. Historically, you have. So if you're betting on like a battle of the sexes, you would rather be on the side that's like, the female side in terms of the battle of the sexes when it comes to voting, just because of historical trends. And then when you see this large gap that's been opened up, you even have now, I don't know if they're being like disingenuous about this and just trying to like drive turnout or whatever, but you see Charlie Kirk and Cernovich both sounding the alarms like men aren't turning out in the numbers that we need, and if they don't, then Trump is going to lose. Now, they may just be pretending to not have confidence, because most of the Trump campaign is running around like, we already won and we're going to win New Mexico and Virginia and whatever, which is preposterous, and also just laying the groundwork for if they were to lose, saying like, oh, we were a sure thing. We were even going to win Colorado, and then they stole it from us. But I did take note of that they were concerned, or at least pretending to be concerned about the gender numbers. So I don't know. That's where we are.
I'm trying to think about how much of a hot take I want to drop on everybody right now.
Do it, babe. Do it, babe.
Well, look, it's
Halloween. Let's get spooky.
You have abortion access that's on the ballot in Arizona, Florida, and Nevada. Mm-hmm. And if historical trends tell us anything, those 3 states are, dare I say, guaranteed to overperform whatever the polls are showing there for Democrats. And this is something I don't see many people taking into account, right? And I don't know why you wouldn't take it into account when Roe versus Wade was overturned. 2022 was a rebuke of the Republican Party for getting Roe v. Wade overturned. And this is still on the forefront of people's minds. The other thing that's on the forefront of people's minds is denying the 2020 election, which Republicans cannot stop fucking doing. Yep. And so you look at that. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm starting to warm up to the notion of I just don't see a comparison to 2016. I don't see it. I think Trump is running a way worse campaign than he ran back then. I think Kamala's is way better than Hillary's was. So to me, at the moment, when you look at it, it does feel more like Obama 2012. And in retrospect, I think people might look back and say, man, yeah, Trump's campaign was horrible. Like Mitt Romney was 47% of the country. Why am I doing a Trump accent for Mitt Romney? 47% of the country are lazy. They're parasites. They're moochers or whatever he said, right? They're takers. And that was just this national massive scandal that was one of many things that tanked his campaign, but there just wasn't much appealing there.
You should do like your 1920s accent for Mitt Romney.
I'm Mitt Romney, see?
Yeah, that one.
47% of the country. They're no good, see? So that tanked him. But also, like, yeah, you never know the things that take off. That's also crazy, right? Like, the Puerto Rico thing really fucking took off. And it's like, people like us are looking at it like, yeah, that was bad. But this is just a random Tuesday for Republicans. The shit Trump says on a regular basis. They're flipping out over the Biden garbage comments. Somebody went back and found a clip of Trump at a rally calling Democrats garbage.
Right.
And it's like, that just, nobody cares.
He
nobody
just
says
called
anything.
the whole country a garbage can.
Right. And it's like, so Trump thinks everything's garbage. Biden thinks it's just MAGA. It's, oh, Biden, how dare you, right?
Yeah,
it's
I know. The rules just don't apply to Trump in the same way. Even a lot of people made the point, if the exact same joke that Tony Hinchcliffe told, if Trump had told that joke, it would have been a nothing, like very little, response, very little. And no Republicans certainly would have distanced themselves from it, as we saw a flood of Republicans rush to do. Like, the rules just don't apply to him in the same way. It's wild. And the other thing that's been interesting to me is like, they've been sending out all these messages to very specific demographic groups, like Coptic Christians and Yemeni Americans and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's almost a very like 2016 Democratic, like, let me slice and dice these different identity groups and be like, this is the shit you care about, right? I'm with you on that. So they're kind of doing that. And the Puerto Rico garbage comment really went against their efforts in that regard, which I think is why the Trump campaign recognized right away, like, oh, this is kind of a problem for us, and we better pretend like we don't even know who this guy is. Like, how did he even get in here? Who sent him? We don't want anything to do with this. And look, we've got a Puerto Rican right here, and we love them, and they love us, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. There's 500,000 of them in Pennsylvania, significant population in and around Philly in particular. If it's close, you could look at it and be like, just imagine that was the thing that's going on.
Yeah.
That's like the whole election. That would be incredible.
Just final point on this. A speaker at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally, he said, quote, the whole party, all of them, talking about Democrats, are lowlives, Jew haters, and degenerates. Barely a mention.
Yeah.
Right?
And of course, J.D. Vance would be like, can't you take a joke? And then the minute that it's Biden incoherently, like, I don't even know that he meant to, like, I actually believe that he didn't really mean to say that. He's just so incoherent that he can't formulate a sentence properly. But yeah, once can't you take a joke? You guys always pro-clutching, blah, blah, blah. And then the second Biden says that,
full snowflake, yeah.
fainting couch,
Full
safe
snowflake.
space. I need it right now. How dare you? This is egregious.